So, good morning, everyone. I welcome you to room 4. And my name is Oluwatobi Taiwo Ishola. I'm a doctoral candidate at BGSU. So today, I'd just like to go through a few information. So the chat is open, and if you have any question, you can just direct your question to me, and I'm going to inform the presenter at appropriate time. So and also if you need anything during the session, just the chat is open. You can direct chat me. And at the end of this session, so if we have two presentation here today. So after the first presentation, if you want to join another room, then you have the opportunity of leaving this Zoom session and then to join the other room. So, and also at the end of the second session, so everyone is required to go back to the main room. So thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Thomas to introduce our colleagues and start the session. Thank you.
And I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Alex Butler, who will serve as our host for our presentation this morning.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Glad you're here. So our presentation, as you'll see here in a second, is made up of a group of people, and we'll explain how we came together during this presentation. And then our takeaways from our meetings. But this presentation is called Interdisciplinary Approaches to Help Educators in Difficult Multicultural Classroom Situations. That's certainly a mouthful, but it's not as much as a mouthful if I read all of our names at once. And so I'm going to, as we go through the presentation, I will turn it over to the next person to speak, and then they will be able to say their name and then do their portion of the presentation. This session, this presentation, is a group of multidisciplinary members of a learning community at at BGSU called Teaching Effectiveness: Strategies and Practices that Touch Students' Hearts and Engage Their Minds. It is associated with the BGSU Center for Faculty Excellence. You might hear us refer to that as the CFE. And the presentation will reflect on various conflictive situations we've faced as educators, sometimes maybe even as students, in multicultural classrooms. So you're going to hear a wide group of professors and graduate students who are also teaching in many instances, talking about their experiences. And when we say multidisciplinary, we really do mean that. We are across the BGSU campus in a whole bunch of different fields and colleges. And so this has been a lot of fun to be able to hear one another's voices, and I'm looking forward to that later as we go through the presentation. Dr. Angela Falter-Thomas is going to lead us off by talking a little bit about how this community came to be.
And thank you, Alex. And thank you, Dr. Reaver, for the nice comments about the free template I found online, so I can share that with you. And I picked it out thinking today would be a January wintry conference, and here we are. So I was asked to lead a learning community for Bowling Green State University through the Center of Faculty Excellence based on some outstanding teaching somebody thought I did. So I will say I was a classroom teacher for 20 years, and I won 2 national awards as a classroom teacher. And when I transitioned then to the university, and I've been here now for the next 14 years, I am finding that the same practices that I used with my elementary and middle school students over those 20 years have served me incredibly well as a college professor as well. And when I was meeting with some folks on how I was going to put together and structure the learning community, I decided that, everything that is important to be a good instructor or a good teacher, to me, is about the relationships and the trust you build with your students. It's that classroom atmosphere and environment that I think sets some good teaching apart. So I put together this learning community based on that and had 11 amazing colleagues join me. And I don't consider myself a leader by any means, but as a facilitator through our group. Alex will next tell us what those sessions looked like, and then each member will contribute a takeaway that they felt that they learned in the learning community. Thanks, Alex.
You're welcome. So our sessions included discussions around the classroom environment, so creating supportive and inviting classroom atmospheres, expectations versus rules. And this was a really interesting one because we essentially did T-charts, an extended T-chart looking at what these meant to us and how they might be different and how we could do them in our classrooms. High expectations, who are they for and what does it mean? And even to the point of who are we teaching towards? Then we never forget that one time. And I don't know about you all, but one of the reasons I became a teacher is because I had a phenomenal experience with a teacher of mine as a student. And so you remember those one times, but you also remember the crazy times when something happened in class and you're like, wow, that was weird and crazy and bad. And that also shapes who we are. And so we talked about those 10 days out of 10 and the need to repair versus always repair. And if you ever want to go out and talk, I have plenty of stories because I was not that great of a student in high school. So I had a lot of never forgetting those one times. But then we also talked about when the teacher sneezes and perceptions becoming reality, the idea of the way we perceive our students and the way that our attitude impacts those around us. And these are all tied together in different components, and it was really fun to see. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Audrey, to to talk about a little bit about how these were then shaped in our settings.
Hi, I'm Dr. Audrey Roberts. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Education and Human Development. I'm actually in between Dr. Thomas and Dr. Butler's offices to triangulate ourselves. Our learning community had a hybrid meeting approach. Sometimes we were in person and sometimes we were virtual via Zoom. Our conversations typically ranged from how do we set classroom norms in undergraduate and graduate settings? What do those look like in online versus in-person settings? And how can we prioritize student voices to create supportive classrooms, recognizing that we have a varying amount of disciplines. We also have students who look different, rather across the university or within our classrooms. Those voices need to be highlighted and prioritized to be able to support them the best. So regardless of what we were talking about, Dr. Thomas was really great about putting us in different groups. Even though there were only, I think you said 11 of us, we had different strategies that she modeled that we could then use in our classrooms, whether it was line up by birthday and then like pass each other, or have certain colors and find that person in pairs, in 3s and 4s as a group. Each of us would contribute to discussions in different ways. And kind of my last bullet point is similar to my third, that a lot of these strategies were creative in a way that kind of broke some of the monotony that we can sometimes feel as teachers, to kind of shift things and allow for students to get a little bit more engaged and have a break as we sort through what we're trying to do and they can sort through their kind of attention spans, because we know really particularly as COVID, attention spans, I think for us all have kind of dipped. So it was a nice reset and gave us some modeling strategies in addition to what we were talking about.
Dr. Roberts, those are great points. And it reminded me that one of the reasons why I took this CFE was because I had been teaching online for the last 2 years, and how helpful this was for me to remember about some of these things and model. The next slide actually is going to introduce you to me, but you've already met me. My name is Dr. Alex Butler. I'm an assistant professor of education in the College of Education and Human Development, and I teach early ed, so people who want to be in pre-K to fifth grade, social studies methods and content as a teacher. And so that's just who I am, and I'm happy to answer questions later. Our second person who is part of our CFE who's going to share this morning is Debipreeta.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I am Debipreeta, a second-year doctoral student in the School of Media and Communication. I was a part of this learning community, and I am an international student over here, and I am also an instructor of record since I joined BGSU. So what I feel is in the US higher education classroom is increasingly becoming diverse, with students coming from various countries, bringing in their cultures, histories, and knowledge. So it is important for us as instructors not to assume that all these students will be familiar with the US classroom practices and American cultural practices from everyday life. So as instructors, we need to create a classroom environment which is positive and inclusive, where we can, where all the students can find it encouraging to share their views, to support each other. And as instructors, we should also provide them an equitable participation platform. Like for non-native speakers of English, there are often challenges with regard to communication and understanding of things. It could be verbal, it could be non-verbal. So we have to facilitate that extra support with compassion, as Dr. Thomas pointed it out to us in a learning community, compassionate pedagogy. So we have to be compassionate towards everyone in the classroom, checking on our biases and respecting the plethora of diversity of opinion, diversity of culture, and the rich knowledge that everyone brings in with them. That's all from my end.
Debipreeta, thank you. And thank you for sharing your experiences oftentimes in our CFE from your own experience at BGSU and at other institutions. We're now going to move to Jennifer, who's going to build on what Debipreeta says, specifically talking about expectations and rules and what's the difference.
Thanks, Alex. My name is Jennifer Stuart. I'm an assistant teaching professor in the Applied Statistics and Operations Research Department in the Schmidt-Horst College of Business at BGSU. It's a very big mouthful, but I'm going to talk a little bit, about expectations and rules, because this topic was really near and dear to my heart, because prior to joining the learning community, I was feeling like, of course I'm being inclusive. But as I grappled more and more with this idea of an inclusive and supportive classroom, I was realizing that I needed to be more intentional with creating that inclusive and supportive classroom that I thought was maybe just being cultivated on its own. So prior to joining the learning community, I had tried an activity. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the activity that I tried. And then towards the end of my presentation here, my piece of the presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the next steps and how that tied into the learning community. So I had tried an activity where on the first day of class, students were tasked with creating our classroom norms or expectations. So it was an interactive activity where students worked in groups or teams, and they created the big bulleted list of what would make this classroom inclusive and supportive for you. And so they worked in groups to come up with these big ideas. And then the group shared out. I was really fortunate. I was in a room with a lot of whiteboards. So I went around and wrote all of the big ideas from all of our groups on the whiteboards. And then each individual got to contribute to this by taking Post-it notes and writing why that norm or expectation is important to them, or how that would contribute to them feeling like they were included in our classroom environment. Or they could just write an example of how they could show that norm or expectation. And so after that, I went back, I gathered all the Post-it notes, gathered all of our big ideas, and I created a Canvas page. At BGSU. We use Canvas as our learning management system. So I created a Canvas page with those norms, expectations, and the contributions from the individual students that I then shared with the classes, and then referenced if we were running into situations where we were maybe not meeting those expectations or norms that we had anticipated. So that brings me to where the learning community and all of my colleagues really helped me, and that was with my next step. And you'll notice that my diagram here is cyclical because I do think that I need to revisit some of these things, and I think they all tie in together, and it does become kind of a cycle. But my colleagues really helped me to think about how I could refine the first day activity, because I was running into situations where we were repeatedly maybe missing the mark on some of our expectations. And so we talked a little bit about policies. Could I get students involved in creating the consequence for repeatedly avoiding or not adhering to the expectations that were agreed upon by the class? And then also online course considerations. How can I help my students in an online classroom also feel like they're part of the inclusive and supportive community that I want them to feel like? And so thankfully, I was in a community that was full of a diverse group of people, thinking of how they're teaching, what they're teaching, and just people in general. They were very diverse. It was a very diverse group. So I was very fortunate to get some very great insight that I'm planning to incorporate and reevaluate my initial plan. So thank you very much. And I will turn it back to Alex.
Thank you, Jen. We really appreciate it. And that's an excellent activity that I've been trying to figure out how do I do this a little bit at the beginning of the semester. Our next presenter is Patrick Casto.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Casto. I'm a PhD student and a teaching assistant in the Neuroscience and Behavior program here at BGSU. And one thing I wanted to share about what I learned from this learning community is a way to keep expectations high in the classroom. And and generally this idea, it diverges from the popular teaching strategy to teach to the middle, where most students land on a bell curve of performance. However, teaching to the middle demotivates the best students, and it makes allowances for poor performance by spending attention on the poor performance. So an example is the expectation for a timely assignment submission. So a teaching to the middle reminder email might state, late assignments will not be accepted. And if you submit your assignment late, you'll get a 0 for the assignment. And I've experienced this as a student and have been pushed to be stern about my high expectations like this during teaching as a teaching assistant. But instead, what I've learned here is to send a reminder email maybe with a different focus in mind, to ask, what will my best students think about this? Will what I'm saying accomplish the goal to get students to turn in their assignments on time? And will my best students feel motivated and acknowledged for turning in their assignments on time? I also have to interject here that I would also say to first assume that everyone's intentions, right, within the classroom are to be the best students. So with keeping the best students in mind while having high expectations, a reminder email might be for turning in their assignments. Thank you, everyone, for turning in your assignments on time. Doing so enables me to provide effective feedback within a short time period and for us to keep moving along within our classroom learning sessions. And and that can be extended, in other parts, but I just wanted to give the example for like a reminder email. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. There we go. Our next presentation is called Rearranging the Deck Chairs on the Titanic, ? By Dr. Margaret Lockwood-Lass. Dr. Lockwood-Lass, you're actually on mute still.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That really helps. I'm glad we have you here. I'm Margaret Lockwood-Lass, and I teach digital arts as well as graphic design thinking in the School of Art at BGSU. I'm here to discuss rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, which is another way of referring to that sinking feeling as we discover that our class is going under, that it's not working, something's not right, whether it's attitude in the classroom or grades going down, or worst of all, total class disengagement and hopefully not mutiny. If we teach long enough, we'll all have one of those classes, which we talked about during our seminar. And it will take more than just rearranging where the students sit, which would be so much easier to fix this. But first, each of us have to do some soul searching, as we discussed in our groups. Our experiences maybe with just 1 or 2 students, 4 or 5 students, or unfortunately, a whole class ganging up. We have to look at, does the blame fall on us? Have we set the students up to succeed, or have we accidentally set them up to fail? Are their needs to succeed in this class being met? Is it the outside forces such as COVID, illness, university expectations, university rules, or the students' expectations just not meeting with yours? One answer that is the easy answer is the semester will end and we can just get through this and hope it never happens again. In that case, you've sunk with the ship. And there will be consequences for you and your students. And the goal was a win-win, and that's what we always want with our students. We want to win-win. Now, not only will we have regrets, so will our students. I teach graphic design thinking, where the mantra, universal mantra is fail often and fail fast, because we acknowledge that to fail is to learn from that failure. And the faster we fail, the faster we learn and the more we learn. So instead of waiting for the next class of students, hoping they'll be better, we need to identify the problems as soon as possible and attempt a quick fix. During our seminar with Angela and reflecting on our personal experiences, we discovered the value of taking time to build relationships and setting expectations with our students. Also, the importance of keeping communications open to build mutual respect and empathy for the entire class. It isn't easy. Some of us have been taught to be the king or queen of the classroom, to take control and be the one in charge. Not the student's friend, but their respected teacher. We are now facing a time when respecting students and their diversity is crucial. Their lives are complex, and they are also feeling under pressure. It's easy for them to become intimidated by us. And remember, loneliness and alienation have become common as students try to assimilate into their new college culture. So, and each of our classes will also have its own culture. Meanwhile, we must help our students by creating the atmosphere that they need, and then teach to each of the students, because they will be made up of different students. Each class of students, and they'll be made up of different students with different needs and desires for the class. Our class conclusion is that the first days in a class set the scene by welcoming students to class, surveying students about what they want from their classes, and involving students in setting class expectations. Then, if we continue to demonstrate that what we do, that we do care, truly care about each one of them, as well as the topic we are teaching, we will all be able to avoid the iceberg without having to rearrange the furniture. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lockwood-Lass. Our next presenter is Dr. Zhou.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ilyoung Zhou. I'm a currently assistant professor in School of Media Communications. So I really feel lucky that I have an opportunity to be part of this learning community. So as previous presenter mentioned about a lot of useful knowledge about teaching. Particularly, I also want to focus on the rule and expectation because I always, before taking this session, I was really focused on the rule and, strict kind of, my perspective on it. But taking this learning session, expand my perspective and view to the learning and value of teaching. So I try to focus on more on student expectation and what their interest and what they really want to get out of my class. So I try to focus on topic or selecting theme because I taught in previous class campaign course. So we had to have one client in a class to work with. So I try to solve their communication problem. So if you go next slide. So I brought some of the examples that I have. So I select the client, the Wood County Human Society, which is animal shelters. They're working for, helping finding adopters, getting donation, and so doing some good work for, the dog and cat. So students closely work with the client and try to solve the problem, how to increase the donation, how to increase more volunteer work there. So I see that students getting more motivations, and also they become more active. And also importantly, throughout this class, they are not only doing the assignment, but they actually create a piece of work that they can use for their portfolio, so that can help them to getting a job later. So I think, again, so yeah, there's another example from another group. So throughout the semester, I really get a lot of, help or a lot of useful, I feel like I get a lot of useful tools from the learning community that I can apply to my class, particularly the rule and expectation perspective. Yeah, if you go to the last slide, it is another storyboard that students create video, not only for the print, but also for the video to encourage the donation and volunteer for that. So yeah, that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. Our next presenter is, oh, the video came up, sorry. There it goes, Gustavo Canas Valle.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm from South America. I'm a graduate student in life sciences and and I've been part of this learning community where I learned how to put together my ideas of past experiences and how to make those leaps of faith to make them work in the future, during my classes, after the learning community, and hopefully in the future as a professor. The question that I had was, as I was participating in the learning community, was what are the initial challenges that I have observed in classes that will satisfy needs of international students, as we are, most of us, in our university. The main three challenges that I found were the need for simple structure. After that, the need for an inclusive environment. And finally, to facilitate the achievement of us students and of our students when we are the ones responsible of the class. I would like to just return to the previous words of the previous presenters Debipreeta mentioned the compassion that is needed for us to be creating an inclusive environment that doesn't assume that everything is familiar for everybody. So we can create that inclusiveness that is necessary in the class. And hence my point that we need to create a structure with simple general directions and one clear goal for that purpose. Then I would like also to bring up the idea that we need to create an inclusive and supportive environment that Jennifer mentioned before. And that idea is used for bridging multicultural differences of learning styles by acknowledging first the individual cultures. So that is my second point. For acknowledging the presence of participants, it's important to make them feel valued. And hence it is important to address them by their names. And that's one memory from the class. Dr. Thomas, Angela was able to give us a welcoming space when she welcomed us the first class, giving us the name tags and gave us, even for me, it was just a written name tag, but it was there. You know, being welcomed is very important in the class. And I would like to emphasize the fact that Patrick mentioned that best students have a high expectation of themselves, and we have a high expectation of ourselves as professors, as facilitators, let's say, during the classes. And therefore, we need to secure the learning of tasks by using imitation and repetition, which are the simplest ways for us to convey our knowledge. I've seen that in the class, in the learning community, and I've used that in the past and confirmed that in the future it will work. Excuse me, it will work. I just want to say that it's true that we want a win-win relation. In the class, we want to achieve goals, and that's what Margaret said, and I would like to close with that. We need to fail often, we need to learn fast, and we need to try to achieve our goals. Thank you for the time.
Gustavo, thank you for that excellent presentation. Our last presenter is Tori Main, and Tori is going to wrap up what we've done this semester. And I'm looking forward to this, to hear her thoughts about it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria Main. I am a first-year master's student at BG, and I'm also a TPS substitute teacher. So I'm real interested in learning about this stuff as well. But as we're wrapping up the interdisciplinary approaches to help educators in difficult multicultural classroom situations, Alex is right, that's a mouthful. But we did hit on a lot of good things. The classroom environment, like Gustav mentioned many of them, expectations versus rule, why we have high expectations, how important support is, valuing differences and acknowledging individual cultures. I think as a group, we did a great job trying to touch on different varying ideas because we were a diverse group as well. Before we go, though, I do want to mention how much I think I speak for the whole group when I say how much we enjoyed Dr. Angela Falter Thomas as our facilitator. She is the embodiment of a lot of these words, excellence, cooperation, respect. She was very honest and adapting and understanding, and she did a fantastic job. So I think I can say for everybody, we thank her very, very much for taking care of us this semester. We would love to have time to answer any questions you might have, or just maybe hear about one of those you never forget stories, good or bad. So if you have any questions for anyone, I'm sure that Alex would be able to point the correct person to answer that. So we'd like to open the floor if we have time.
We do have time, and
Right.
I am willing to flip back through slides if you would like to go to a slide and say, hey, I had a question about this. You can raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and talk.
Now we were that complete. Nobody has any questions for us.
I can just say how much I appreciated this conversation. I know in all of my 30 plus years of teaching, probably the year after COVID, when we were coming back face to face, was probably the most challenging year of my life, as well as with my students. And this just really helps me think back and reflect on that experience that I had, and things that I could have done differently, things that I did have in place, things that I didn't have in place, things that were so unexpected in terms of student trauma, just from the 2020 experience, 2020, 2021 experience, and how I certainly didn't think of everything. And I thought, oh, shoot. Like, I really needed to be more empathetic. I really needed to be more, hands-on with my students, even though the distance was still necessary, and the trauma, even for us as educators, and what we experienced as well. So I really appreciate this conversation, because as I reflect and move forward, so much of what you said is like, yeah, can I have the slideshow? Can I have, like, this is good. So I am so thrilled that all of you had this learning community and you could work together. I think we need more of this, where we have these interdisciplinary conversations across campus, across the university, as well as in our schools, where we sit down and have these conversations, and we don't get stuck just in our content areas of what we teach, but we have this because we're all going through it together. And I think sometimes we forget that, and we need the support of one another. So thank you. I appreciate this whole conversation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I too agreed with her and everyone else, I'm sure, even those of us that are not speaking. I truly enjoyed this conversation. The slide that triggered me most is the one that offered for me confirmation, because I do a lot of that in the classroom. And it escapes me which slide that was, but it was about creating an environment that is welcoming and makes the children feel comfortable. I think we are all challenged by COVID, by the effects of COVID. I'm a second grade teacher. I think the most challenging time of my career was during the quarantine, when we were teaching virtually. And anyone that teaches primary, K through third grade, knows that those children need you in person. And so it was rewarding for me to be able to go back in person when I did. And yes, we did meet the challenges. We're still dealing with the challenges of COVID. But again, I truly appreciated this session. And I think it brought about a lot of things. Now, my question is this just an interdisciplinary group that's at Bowling Green, or are you reaching out to school districts?
Our learning community was part of Bowling Green State University.
Okay. Well, I truly did enjoy it. And I have attended other conferences at Bowling Green. So of course, this was really another opportunity for me. I truly did enjoy this.
Thank you. What I have learned as a professor at the university is a student is a student is a student. So yes. The same thing I am using when I taught kindergarten, first and second grade, and I also taught 6th, 7th, and 8th for a period of years. I'm using those same strategies and really treating those same students the same way I do at the university that I did back in my elementary days. The students want to know that they are respected, that they are seen, that you care for them. And then once that's established, the content just comes so much more easily, in my opinion.
It does. And so you can agree with me then that the little ones need to be able to hug their teacher. They need to be able to touch their teacher. They need to be able to see a real person, not a screen. So
absolutely. I do see a comment in the chat. Somebody saying suggestions for combating the lack of support and respect for the education environment. And my personal feeling on that is no one cares. They think you have the summer off. So I'm not going to combat that. What I am going to do to those in the public that say those negative comments to me is I'm going to keep telling them the fabulous things that are going on in my classroom.
I'm not even talking about other people, because I don't care, well, honestly, what the public thinks, because they don't know. I'm talking about my students. My students come in and sorry about the mess in the background, I just moved. They come in and they don't value their grades. They don't value an education. That's doing too much. And some of them, we have great relationships. They come in, they talk to us about stuff. They talk to me about things that they don't even talk to their counselors about, whatever. They're respectful. They just have no value. Education isn't valued at home. Education isn't valued by their peers. And I try, but any suggestions anybody's got that I can add to my toolbox, I would be very grateful for.
I think you've done that first step. They know you're there and they know you care. And think about those that were trying to, I think they know in a safe environment with you, they can push and say things, but they're ultimately learning from you as a result of your role modeling and how you respond to them. So I'm not going to say you're not in an incredibly tough position. I think you are. I think what you're doing is very hard work, but I also will say you probably have made more of an impact than you realize. And that's not a position you want to be in, because you want to feel valued and loved and respected, all the same things you're giving to your students. But I'll also say, we can't change the world. We can keep doing little bites, and those little bites are going to add up and make a difference. And it's a tough profession.
I want to add to that. I'd like to add to that comment. This is Cindy Ross. I teach at Bowling Green State University, and I work specifically with career tech teachers. And one of the things that I really have discovered of being a part of career tech is that anytime that you can give your students exposure to real life and jobs and careers and the importance of what education will do for them by giving them those exposures, it really makes a big difference. I think that one of the problems that we have since COVID especially is that we are so confined to the four walls of our classrooms that we don't provide necessarily those really important opportunities to get out and see how important education is to students or careers, and what it takes to be successful in those careers. So I just feel like sometimes when they get those exposures, they start to appreciate a little bit more what is happening then in the four walls of your classroom. And that's just a personal opinion and what I've witnessed of being in the career tech environment.
Torio, you still have your hand raised. Would you like to chime in, or did Dr. Falter Thomas, looks like you just took it down. Cool.
Yeah, I'm just clueless, sorry.
No, that's totally good.
May I also touch on that with a suggestion? Is the idea of storytelling. So if you're able to tell a story about the way that you've learned in the past, right? If those students are already coming in and as you said, they're being respectful to you, they're opening up to you, right? If you can tell them about a story that that brought on a passion for you for learning, I think they might start to emulate that as well.
Hopefully. Thank you for the suggestions.
Sure.
Well, if I can throw my 2 cents in as well, in regards to Torio, you were saying about how do you get them to value education, and I concur that I came from a home that did not value education, and I just got my degree last May because I watched my children graduate from college, and I was like, oh my God, I can do that, So I think showing them, like you said, having role models that show them the way is probably the best way for them to learn if they're not getting it from their home, because that was how I ended up valuing education. As I grew older, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be a waitress till I'm 50. I want to do something else. And I was a waitress up until 2 years ago when I went back to college. So, I didn't get that instilled in me. And I wish I had teachers that had inspired me a little more and thank you. Yeah. But letting me, instead of just sending me out into the world and letting me flail, I wish I had more people who cared personally and guided me a little bit more. So I think, like Angela said, just be there for them, guide them, and show them that there is more to life than Burger King and waitressing. There really is, and I know that sounds terrible, but what else do you do if you don't have an education? There's really no, I guess now it's becoming a little more easy to, you know, provide for your family. But a few years ago, if you didn't have a college degree, you couldn't get a decent job, you know? So education's everything, if you ask me.
Tori, I think that's a great point. And I don't know if we're about to be told that we have to stop, but we literally have like 20 seconds left. So I just want to say on behalf of our CFE, thank you all for coming and listening to us. Continue to reflect on this process. If you haven't read through the chat, there's a lot of chat happening. Please go do that because it's some good stuff in there. And from my perspective, and I know others at BG, if we can ever do anything to support you in your classrooms, please feel free to reach out to us. Just type in our names and type BGSU and it will take you to our email. Don't call my office phone though, because I don't know how to check my messages, but email me and I'd be happy to get back to you. So thank you so much for coming and we hope you have a wonderful time at the conference this morning.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next session will start at 11:15. And if you're going to be part of that session, you can hang out here. And if not, you can join any room, the other rooms. And I think you have the information on the schedule that was given to you. So you can probably go there and click on the link. Thank you so much.